Pamela Zimmerman was an accountant from Bloomington, Illinois, who was shot to death while working in her office in the early evening of November 3rd, 2014. Her ex-husband, Kirk Zimmerman, was later arrested and tried for her murder, but ultimately found not guilty. Was Kirk unfairly targeted by the police from the beginning, or did he get away with the perfect murder? Let's talk about it. Pamela Zimmerman was a successful CPA, business owner, mother of 3, and was described by her friends and family as hardworking and fun-loving. She was found in the early morning hours of November 4th, 2014. She had been shot to death 4 times in her office, 2 bullets in her chest, 1 in her temple, and 1 in her back. She was found by her friend and neighbor, Julie Coe, as well as her office manager, Ina Ness. So let's back up a little bit and talk about what happened the night before that led them to go to Pam's office. So Pam's 3 teenage children were living with her at the time, David, Heidi, and Rachel. And it wasn't unusual for Pam to work late at night. In fact, they often left the lights on for her before they went to bed. But she always called them to let them know that she wouldn't be home. So this night they found it a little strange when they didn't receive a phone call from her. Once a few hours had gone by and they hadn't heard from her, they had been trying to call her. One of her daughters actually used the Find My iPhone app that they shared to try to locate where her mother might be. And what she found was that the iPhone was not located at Pam's office, but it was a few blocks away at a strange location. The kids tried to tell themselves, you know what, maybe she went to a client's house and that's why she was working late. So they hoped for the best, left the lights on for her, and went to bed. In the early morning hours of November 4th, her friend and neighbor, Julie Coe, who just lived a few houses down from her, received a phone call from Pam's brand new fiance, Scott Baldwin. Pam and Scott had just gotten engaged 3 days before. Now, he didn't live in Bloomington. He lived a few hours away up by Chicago. So he and Pam generally called and texted each other throughout the evening. And when he hadn't been able to get a hold of her, he became concerned. So he called Julie and asked Julie if she'd heard from Pam. Julie said no, but I'm going to go down and, ring her doorbell, check her house. When Julie got to the home and the kids were concerned and said, nope, they hadn't heard from Pam either, she had never come home, Julie immediately knew that something was wrong. So she got dressed, jumped in her car, and made her way down to Pam's office building. Now, Pam's office is located at 2103 East Washington Street. And for those of us who live in Bloomington, we know that's called Doctor's Park. So there's a lot of medical offices there. It's just kind of row after row of office building. And it's located directly off of Veterans Parkway, which is a busy roadway in Bloomington. As soon as Julie pulled up, she saw Pam's car in the parking lot and she knew something wasn't right. At the same time that Julie was pulling into the parking lot, Pam's office manager, Ina Hess, was arriving for her workday. Now, when she'd left the night before, everything was fine. Pam was actually in a closed-door meeting with her last client of the day. Ina didn't think anything of it and went home. Well, Julie quickly told Ina what was going on, and the 2 women decided to go into the office to see if they could find Pam. Now, Ina noticed immediately that something was wrong because the blinds in the office windows were closed, and they never closed the blinds. So when they opened up the door and flipped on the lights, unfortunately, they found Pam in the fetal position right by Ina's desk in the front of the office. She had been shot 4 times, 2 in the chest, 1 in the temple, and 1 in her back. Immediately, Ina also noticed something strange. So typically there's a cordless phone on Ina's desk that they use as the office phone. That handset was missing and the phone cord had been cut. Also, Pam's purse was sitting on Ina's desk wide open, and they would later discover that Pam's cell phone and her wallet were missing. Another item that Ina noticed was missing out of the office was the calendar that she used to keep track of Pam's appointments. Obviously, the women were devastated. They quickly called 911, and that's when the search for Pam's killer began. 3 main suspects emerged right away. The first was Kirk Zimmerman, who was Pam's ex-husband. They had gotten divorced in 2012 after 20 years of marriage. Now, Kirk had told police that they had an amicable divorce, and he was in fact seeing somebody new. Her name was Kate Arthur. Suspect number 2 was Scott Baldwin, who was Pam's brand new fiance. Scott and Pam had met on the internet and had only been dating for about 3 months when Scott had proposed 3 days before Pam's murder. Suspect number 3 was Eldon Whitlow, who happened to be Pam's last client of the day. So they started there because they knew that Eldon was probably the last person, besides the killer, if he wasn't the killer, to see Pam alive. Eldon told police that he arrived about 4 p.m. for his appointment. He was greeted by Ina, the office manager, and there was also an intern working in Pam's office at that day. Now, he went to Pam's office, closed the door, they had their meeting. Ina and the intern left the office about 4:15, so shortly after Eldon had arrived for his appointment. He told police that they wrapped up about 5:30. Pam had walked him to the lobby of the office building. He'd gotten his car and driven away. He didn't notice anything suspicious. One reason that Eldon was on the police's radar from the beginning is that they discovered the gun used to kill Pam was a 9mm handgun, and Eldon happened to have a 9mm handgun registered to him. So police, of course, asked to see the gun. Eldon voluntarily showed them the gun. They ran tests on it and discovered that the gun had not been fired recently. So this was not the gun used to shoot Pam. Eldon also had an alibi. After he had met with Pam, he had gone straight to meet his girlfriend for dinner. So as far as they were concerned, Eldon didn't really emerge as a main suspect. They also didn't have any reason to suspect Eldon. And in fact, Ina had said he and Pam had a great working relationship. She had been helping him for years with his investments, and frankly, there was no motive for him to have shot Pam. So then police started to look at Scott Baldwin, Pam's brand new fiance. What they discovered after interviewing Scott is that maybe he and Pam's relationship hadn't been as solid as it first appeared. They did discover that Scott was seeing a couple different ladies in the 3 months leading up to him proposing to Pam. But ultimately, Scott was ruled out because he didn't live in Bloomington. He had an airtight alibi for the night of Pam's death, as did the other women that he were seeing. So they don't believe that Pam's death had any connection to Scott or a love triangle situation or anything like that. So that's when police started to take a closer look at Kirk. On November 4th, after they had discovered Pam's body, police went to State Farm Insurance, where Kirk had worked as a business analyst, and asked him to come down to the office. They explained that something had happened with Pam. Kirk was very cooperative in his initial interview with the police. He never asked for an attorney. He was calm, cool, and collected. In fact, if you watch the Dateline NBC episode where they talk about Pam Zimmerman's murder, they actually show clips of Kirk being interviewed, and he's very calm and very cooperative the entire time. They asked him if they could do a DNA sample. He complied. They actually fingerprinted him. They also did a gunpowder residue on his hands that, again, he voluntarily cooperated with. He didn't have to. And he also voluntarily gave over his cell phone and his laptop to the police. Now, they asked Kurt, where were you last night? He said that he wrapped up with work at State Farm about 4:15. He went home, he did a little bit of yard work, then he went into his house where he read a bit on his Kindle and fell asleep while he was reading up in his bedroom. That was it. So cops let him go on his way. So what made them start to look closer at Kirk Zimmerman? Well, for starters, after they talked to Kirk's girlfriend, Kate Arthur, they discovered that there was a bit of discrepancy in Kirk's alibi. So Kate told them that she and Kirk actually had a date for the night that Pam was murdered, and she was supposed to go over to his house at 7 p.m. that evening. She had actually finished up with her errands a bit early, so she went to his house at 6:30, knocked on the door, he didn't answer. She rang the doorbell, he didn't answer. She texted him, he didn't text back. So she waited for a few minutes and then texted him, hey, I'm gonna run home, get cleaned up, text me if you get this message. She didn't hear back from Kirk until a little after 7. That is significant because that's one, drastically different than what he originally told police. And when they brought him back in to talk to him about that, he said the reason that he didn't bring up that Kate was there is because he loves her and he didn't want to involve her in this situation. But police suspected the reason he didn't mention this is because he wasn't home at the time they suspect that Pam was shot. So let's backtrack a little to the night that Pam was shot. Cops know, if you believe Eldon, that he left about 5:30. They also know, after doing forensic evidence on Pam's cell phone, which, by the way, they found thanks to the daughter's Find My iPhone app a few blocks away from Pam's office. They also found her wallet, the cordless phone, everything that had been taken from the crime scene. So it almost looked like somebody had just tossed it out of the window a few blocks away. So what the police discovered once they had Pam's cell phone and they did some forensic testing on it is they could actually see that it moved from her office at 6:15. So now we have a pretty tight window of Pam's death. So somewhere between 5:30 and 6:15, they know Pam was shot. They also know that the killer actually stuck around the office a little bit because he or she collected 3 of the 4 shell casings from the bullet. The 4th shell casing was actually lodged in one of Pam's office chairs, so they didn't collect that one. Police also believe that taking the cordless phones, cutting the phone lines, taking her wallet and her cell phone really were just to make it look like a robbery had occurred. They believed that the whole thing was very staged. Furthermore, when they found Pam's wallet, nothing had been taken out of it. Her ID was in there, all of her credit cards, her cash, so it makes it a little more suspect. So knowing that Pam's cell phone was moved from the office by 6:15 is very significant to Kirk's alibi, because if he wasn't home at 6:30, then where was he at? Was he in fact upstairs sleeping, which is what he told police, that yes, I fell asleep. I just didn't hear when Kate came to the door and she knocked and she rang the doorbell and she texted my phone. He said he just didn't hear her there. He woke up a little after 7, saw that she had been texting him, told her to come back over. Kate said she did in fact go over to the house a little after 7 and that she was there till about 9 p.m. She said that Kirk acted fine. He acted the same as he always did. There was nothing suspicious or out of the usual about his behavior. The other thing that the cops really dug into was Kirk and Pam's divorce, which had occurred a couple years earlier. Now, Kirk had originally told police in his first interview with them that they had an amicable divorce, and in fact, he would have preferred that they waited to get divorced until all 3 of the kids had graduated from high school. So it sounds to me like Pam's probably the one that initiated the divorce and kind of pushed for it to be as soon as it was. What police actually found out, though, from talking to Pam's friends and family is that their divorce was anything but amicable. In fact, a lot of it centered around their finances. So Kirk had been a longtime employee of State Farm Insurance, which is based in Bloomington, Illinois. He was a business analyst there and by all accounts did not like his job. And his dream was really to retire by age 55. In order to do that, he was going to need his full pension from State Farm. Here's where his divorce from Pam threw a monkey wrench in that, because she was technically entitled to half of that pension. And that was a point of contention in their divorce. And in fact, her divorce lawyer said she kept asking Pam, do you want to go after his pension? Do you not? Finally, Pam said, you know what? If I go after his pension, I'm too scared what he would do to me or the kids if I got half of his money, because she knew that that meant he wouldn't be able to retire. So in the end, she ultimately decided not to go after his pension. They settled that she would get the house and they worked out child support payments. There were emails that did come up in the pretrial, and actually police found these. This email exchange happened April 29th, 2012. Kirk had actually emailed Pam and said, quote, "This process has gone on a shocking number of weeks, and I cannot wait to be done with you, but I will not hand you my life savings so close to retirement." Pam wrote back, "I cannot wait to be done with you too." So definitely not an amicable divorce. At the time of Pam's death, in fact, Kirk was behind about $4,000 in child support payments. So on October 23rd, 24th, Pam had her office manager, Ina, draft up a letter to Kirk stating you're behind the $4,000 in child support. This is your third notice. If you don't pay this, I'm taking you back to court. And she had that letter FedEx to Kirk, which he would have received on around October 24th. Pam had actually disclosed to Ina several times that she was scared of Kirk as well. In the pre-trial testimonies, more friends and family came forward to say variations on that theme, that Pam had told them she was scared of Kirk. He had actually purchased a house just a couple blocks away from her after the divorce. Now, Kirk claimed it was to make things easier for the kids, and perhaps it was, but Pam was nervous and told one of her friends, I could just imagine standing at the kitchen window washing dishes one day and Kirk putting a bullet in my head. So there was some fear there against her ex-husband. And then when she got engaged 3 days before her murder, she had told another friend, I'm scared that Kirk is going to go ballistic when he hears this news. So where there's smoke, there's fire. So police started to dig a little bit deeper. They discovered that Kirk had got this FedEx letter about the child support and that Pam was going to take him back to court. So the prosecution was arguing that he was mad about the expenses. He had this added expense of the child support. So even though he got his pension in the divorce, this was putting a strain on his finances. Police got a search warrant for Kirk's house and his car, and in fact, dropped Kirk off at a hotel and spent 6 days searching his home. I'm imagining that they were trying to find the 9mm gun that was used in Pam's murder, which to this day has never been recovered. They also took his car and they tested it for gunpowder residue. So they did find that there was gunpowder residue on the gear shift of Kirk's vehicle. Now, the defense argued that that could have been a transfer, or that maybe even that was planted because the police were heavily looking at Kirk as a suspect and wanted to be able to make arrests in this murder. To me, the gunpowder residue is a little iffy. I find it hard to believe that if somebody did have gunpowder residue on them, it would only be on the gear shift. And if you did try to clean up your car afterwards, isn't the gear shift the first place that you would go to clean it up? So that to me is a little inconclusive as well. The other thing that the prosecution said is that they believe that Kirk Zimmerman went across the border to the state of Indiana to purchase a firearm because Indiana had more lax purchasing laws around their firearms than Illinois does. Special Agent Greg Cady actually testified in the trial. They had about 37 pages of cell tower data. So this is what they discovered with the cell tower data. Looking at records showing a communication between a device in the defendant's car and cell towers, they actually placed Zimmerman's car not at home by 6:31, but in the vicinity of Pam's office. So let me say that again. Basically, Kirk's cell phone showed him being at home, but his GPS device in his car, which was a silver Honda Sonata, that is going to come into play later, it was showing that it was in the vicinity of Pam's office. Obviously, that makes sense with what Kate Arthur said, that when she got to Kirk's house at 6:30 and he didn't answer the door, she assumed he wasn't home. Police are saying, no, he wasn't home. The other thing that's interesting is they show travel in his vehicle later that night. So again, Kate Arthur had said she left Kirk's home about 9 p.m. Kirk said he never left his home after that. GPS and cell towers are recording that his vehicle was on several east side areas about 10:28 p.m. for about an hour. And it happens to be where they found Pam's cell phone, wallet, and the items for her office. So prosecutors theorized that he had gone out after Kate left and tossed those items out the window. So the defense said that that was junk science. And they brought in an expert to disprove this and to say that there's no way that you can use the GPS in his car to accurately determine where he was at. The other thing that the prosecution used the GPS for is that they said on October 25th, which was the day after Kirk Zimmerman received the FedEx letter from Pam stating that he owed the $4,000, he actually made a trip to Indiana. So they tracked his car into Indiana. He went right over the border, was there for a little bit, came back. Again, they're arguing that he went to Indiana to illegally purchase a firearm. Now, one thing that did not work in the prosecution's favor is the fact that they could never prove that. They never found the gun. They never had proof that Kirk Zimmerman purchased or otherwise acquired a 9mm handgun. So again, draw your own conclusions on that. The other thing that police found when they searched Kirk Zimmerman's laptop is he had several searches that he had conducted about 10 days before Pam was shot. And the searches were, can I suspend Sirius in my car? And then other searches about how do I wipe off or delete my GPS, both from my phone and my car, which again, police thought was odd that he was searching that. The other evidence that the prosecution presented were surveillance camera footage from around the area of Pam's office on the night of her murder. So there is a car that kind of looks like it could be Kirk's. It's a silver car. Again, Kirk drove a silver Honda Sonata. They show this security camera footage on the Dateline NBC episode of this. And if I was a juror, I would have a very hard time to for sure IDing that that's Kirk's car. Now, this particular car had a sunroof on it, which Kirk's car also had, but you can't see who's driving the car. You can't see the license plates of the car, and it very well could have been another Honda Sonata that was in the area. Again, Pam's office was located in a very busy area of Bloomington, so there's a lot of traffic that goes by there. So again, you know, I don't feel like that's a really strong evidence in this case. Then you have an eyewitness. Now, I highly encourage everybody, and I will link the NBC Dateline episode below, please go on and watch this, because the eyewitness in this case for the prosecution, I'm just going to say it, she was a disaster on the stand. I actually think she hurt the prosecution way more than she helped them. I actually don't think she helped them at all. So the eyewitness's name was Maria Leck, and she's a 79-year-old Bloomington woman. She said that on the night of November 3rd, the night that Pam was shot, she was at a church that is across the parking lot from Pam's office. She was recycling old newspapers and magazines near the church, and she testified that she saw Kirk Zimmerman standing by a vehicle outside of Pam's office. She said that the man had hair like Liberace, and she did point him out in court. She said, yes, this is a man that I saw, and she pointed to Kirk. But on cross-examination, she stated that she saw this person getting into a black vehicle and was pretty adamant that they were getting into a black vehicle. Now, Kirk's car was silver. Again, it was dark. She was across the parking lot. She was very emotional on stand. She didn't come across as very confident in her choices. And for me, I feel like eyewitness footage, unless you have several eyewitnesses that are all testifying to seeing the exact same thing, I think it's very easy to discredit, which is exactly what the defense did. So that was pretty much the prosecution's argument, is that one, Kirk was mad about the expenses that he incurred during this divorce. He was furious that he wasn't able to retire at age 55 like he had planned. They had this contentious divorce. The fact that Pam had sent them this FedEx letter saying, you're in contempt if you don't pay me this $4,000, I think just fueled the fire. Now, Kirk is saying that's ridiculous. I would never kill somebody over $4,000. I had the money to pay it, to which I say, well, then why didn't you just pay it in the first place? But sometimes I do feel like it's not the amount of money, but it's the point of it. Or else, like I said, why wouldn't he have just paid that the first time that he owed it? So you've got the money, you've got the contention with the divorce. Then he finds out that Pam is engaged. The other evidence in the prosecution's case is all circumstantial. And I think that's what hurt them more than anything, because they didn't really have any clear-cut forensic evidence to tie Kirk to the scene of the crime or to the murder weapon itself. So the defense really didn't have much of a defense. Kirk actually didn't even testify in his own defense, which isn't very unusual in a criminal trial. But basically, his two of his three children, David and Heidi, got up on the stand and testified, our father could have never done this. He didn't act unusual or strange in the weeks leading up to Pam's death. They had some neighbors that got on the stand and said, yep, we saw Kirk doing yard work in his yard, at the time that Kirk said he was there. So that was really it. And then the defense rests. So now it's up to the jury to decide the verdict. And it didn't take them long. So it took them 2 days, but only about a total of 7.5 hours. And they came back with a verdict of not guilty. So of course, Kirk and his kids are elated. Like I said, his 3 kids stood by him this whole time, have always defended their father, said that he could have never done this. So they're joyful. The other side of the courtroom, not so much. So Pam's friends and family are devastated, and they believe that Kirk got away with this murder. Again, my own thoughts on it are, because I live in Bloomington, at the time of this murder occurring and subsequent trial, this was heavily in the media. And I definitely had an opinion of this case when it all happened in real time. But when you sit down and you kind of go back over it and you read everything and you read what the prosecution presented, they didn't have a strong case. I think I would have had a very hard time as a juror finding him guilty, because could you really prove him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt with nothing but circumstantial evidence? And again, I think the defense did a great job of creating that reasonable doubt in the mind of the jurors. Dateline NBC actually followed the trial of Kirk Zimmerman. So when you think about the timeline of this, so Pam's murder occurred in 2014. Kirk Zimmerman was not arrested until 8.5 months later in July of 2015. He spent 4 months in jail before he could post out bond, and then he spent another 4 years under house arrest before his trial began in April of 2019. So this is a long, drawn-out process. So Dateline came, covered the trial. Again, Kirk didn't give an interview to Dateline, but his 3 children spoke on his behalf. And that's really who I think I think about them when I talk about this case, because all 3 of them were in high school when this happened. High school is stressful enough. Can you imagine graduating from high school, starting college? That's stressful in the best of circumstances, but now you're dealing with the murder of your mother, the arrest of your father. You now have to wait 4 years until this goes to trial. And even after he's found not guilty, I will tell you, as a resident of Bloomington, the public opinion on Kurt is not favorable. So these poor kids, I wonder if any of them will stick around Bloomington. I don't know where Kurt's at right now. I actually tried to find a little follow-up and see if he was still living in Bloomington, but I couldn't find anything conclusive on that. I wouldn't be surprised if he moved away. I think it would be really hard for him to start over his life in any way, shape, or form in this town, because like I said, public opinion is just not favorable on him. My hope is really that one day Pam's 3 children, David, Heidi, and Rachel, will find out and have a definitive answer on who killed their mother, so they'll get the closure that they deserve. I'm going to wrap up this episode with a quote from Pam's obituary. Pam was an example for what we all want to see of more in this world today. Above all else, Pam was a kind, caring, and devoted mother who would tell anyone who asked that the greatest treasures in her life were her 3 children. Pam dedicated her life to giving to others and living life with self-discipline, responsibility, moral clarity, courage, steadfast determination, and virtue. She was truly a special person, beloved and respected by all, and a spiritual woman involved in many church and volunteer activities. Her efforts each day brought us wisdom, happiness, and made the world a better place. She will never be forgotten and will always be an inspiration to show us how to live our lives. Hi guys, thanks for watching this episode. Please give a thumbs up, hit that subscribe button if you want to know more about murders in the Midwest on a weekly basis. Also, make sure to check out Murder in the Midwest on Instagram, where I post updates about these stories. Thanks for watching.